So hi everyone, Happy New Year for all of you that I haven't seen and I haven't said Happy New Year yet. First meeting of the year. We're very happy to start a new year with the community, and we have a few fun things for today's meeting, and I hope you find them interesting. And of course, we love to get questions or comments about everything you see here. And if you have any other question or comment about anything around OpenFGA, please add them in the chats, and so we can take them at the end of the conversation. So this is in general our agenda. We start with intros. In general, we invite people who it's the first time we are attending this meeting to introduce themselves. I see a couple of new faces, so it would be great if you can spend some time introducing yourself to the community. I'll do it myself. I'm Andres. I've been working on the OpenFGA project since the beginning. I work for Okta. I joined Okta as part of the acquisition of Auth0. Joined Auth0 like 8.5 years ago, and I've been moderating some of these meetings in the last couple of years. Anyone else wants to intro yourselves? I see Jeremy, and he presented in a community a couple of months ago. So hi, Jeremy. Hi, Steven. I also recognize other faces from and hi, Alex in the tennis tonight.
Yeah, I can do a short one. So I'm Jeremy, community member. I work at Headspace. We use OpenFGA, like Andres mentioned. We presented I think it was October, maybe it was November meeting, so you can check that in the archives. And yeah, excited to learn about caching today.
Awesome. Anyone else? Okay, so let's do it. So this is our team, and you probably see a lot of us in these meetings. Not everyone attends all the meetings because we have work to do too, but yeah, we have a pretty large team working on OpenFGA at Okta. And here there's also some members of the community that are maintainers of the project, but not Okta employees. Okay, intros. I'll step ahead of in my previous slide. Okay, so we already did this. Let me go to the next one. You probably heard this. We've been mentioning it in the last couple of meetings, but yeah, OpenFGA is now an incubation project, and it was kind of a large due diligence process with a CNCF that finished in November, and so we're very happy for that to happen. And next step for us is getting to graduation. It might take us a couple of years, but that's the goal. So last meeting was in December 11, so we didn't have a lot of time and a lot of people in vacation during December, so we haven't shipped much. I think is the time we shipped less things between two community meetings, but yeah, we also need to take vacations from time to time, and that's what happened here. So I have a few topics. I'm gonna let Sad now present. I'll stop sharing my screen so Sad can present, and about caching. Caching is been in the product for a while. We never really documented it well, and Sad spent some time on it, and he will share how it works and get your questions.
So yeah, like Andres mentioned, this is something we've already had, but just going to talk about it a bit since we've been working on documenting it. So just from the top, there are a few different types of caching that OpenFGA has. There's the check query cache, check iterator cache, list objects iterator cache, and then this thing called the cache controller, which I'll go into some more details for all of these in a second. But just some notes about each of these that one, these all can be enabled and configured separately. By default, they are disabled. So you will need to enable these if you want to make use of them. Another thing is that the cache is just in memory. So the big implication in that is that different replicas of an OpenFGA server would not share cache. So, if you like have to, for example, scale your uh, deployment, it might make sense to favor vertical scaling over horizontal scaling to try to minimize the number of replicas so that you can get more cache hits. Um, and you could also think of other kind of creative ways of like maybe load balancing to get similar requests to the same replica, um, things like that. But yeah, just something to note. And then the last thing, even if you have enabled caching and you want to avoid any staleness for a given request, you can always pass this parameter in the request body. It's called consistency, and you can set it to this value called higher consistency, in which case you would bypass caching entirely for that request. So let's get into some of these different cache types. So the first one is the check query cache. So what this caches is the overall allow or deny decision for a check request, as well as for any intermediate checks. So when you do a check request, you are checking if a user has a relationship to an object. Um, and sometimes in evaluating that, we have to evaluate if, an intermediate user has another kind of relationship to an object. So as an example, there is this entitlements sample store in OpenFGA. Um, I won't show the whole model, but basically it has some tuples and we'll kind of hopefully piece together what's happening here. So if we make this query, does user Charles have relationship can access with object feature draft PRs? We'll see that two check query cache entries are set. The first one is just that exact question, which is like the overall result of the check. In this case, it is a true. Um, but he doesn't have access to it directly. He, is part of like an organization. Whoops, sorry. He's like a member of an organization, and that organization has, some other relationship, something, and that has another relationship with this uh, like feature. Um, so an intermediate check, which also gets cached, is if user Charles has relationship subscriber member with object plan enterprise. So this is like something when you actually look at, the model and the tuples, um, this is kind of like an intermediate check that needed to be evaluated as well. So that gets cached as well. Um, there are a few different configuration options here. One is just the check cache limit. That's just the total size of the cache. So that's not specific just to this cache entry. It applies to the other cache entries as well. And then, of course, just the flag to enable it or disable it. Default is that it's disabled. And then you can set the TTL for this. So how long will these entries live in cache? And the longer it is, the more you can take advantage of it, but the more potential for stale responses. Um, so the next one, the check iterator cache. This caches the raw tuple query results from the database. So while evaluating the check, there will need to be some calls to the database to pull in a bunch of tuples. And this basically caches just those list of tuples. Um, so again, I'll use an example from this entitlements sample store. Um, Same exact query. Does user Charles have relationship can access with object feature draft PRs? Um, so there are a few things that are being evaluated. So one is what users have relationship associated plan with feature draft PRs, because that's what basically gives the access to that. And the different items that are relevant here would be cached. So in this case, there's two plans, Plan Enterprise and Plan Team. Um, And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, but like these cache keys and cache values are kind of simplified. In the actual code, it gets, kind of encoded, but um, this is just a simplified version of what they really represent. Um, so another iterator cache key would be what users have relationship subscriber with object plan enterprise. Um, in this case, it was just a list of one item. And then there's a third iterator cache key that got cached from this query, which was all the tuples where user Charles has relationship member with objects of type organization. Um, so you can see that basically there's, a bunch of different kind of queries that will need to take place as part of evaluating a check, and just the different like tuples that are returned from the database, those will get cached. So a few
I
different.
see.
I see.
Question.
Yeah, Alex has a question.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Hey, just curious, you're saying it's caching the tuples in memory. Does that include the context so that it's able to evaluate, like we have some conditions on our tuples that are like, it's not, you can't access until after this time, and the same pair of IDs might be requested, 10,000 times, but with different timestamps each time. So will that hit this cache as well?
Um, I'd have to double check. I forget, but sorry.
Yes, it will hit the cache, but the key there will be the full thing, right? So the context values will be part of the key, right? Same thing if you send contextual tuples, right? Because we cannot know the value of the final result, right, without the full context. So
Totally. And that
yeah,
makes
so
sense for
that's it.
the check cache, but maybe I misunderstood. I thought this was saying that you're just caching the tuples themselves in memory, like the
Yeah,
rows.
you're right. Sorry. Yeah, I misunderstood. Yeah, for this one, I think we catch them regardless of that, right? But it's a good question. I don't see why we would need to have the context for this specific cache.
Okay, thank you.
In any case, access. Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. So just some configuration options here. Again, the check cache limit, that's just, the limit for all the cache entries. Um, and then again, same things about, enabling this cache entry and setting the TTL. The one different thing is that you can set the max results. So this is basically the maximum number of tuples that each of those iterator cache entries can store. And the default is 10,000, but that can be tuned. Maybe that's consuming too much memory, so you might want to change that. Maybe you have more memory, so you might want to increase that. So yeah, that's just one thing there. And then the list objects iterator cache is basically the same as the check iterator cache, but it is used in list objects requests, and it just has all the same configuration options as the check iterator cache. So nothing too much to talk about here. And then the last thing is the cache controller, which adds a slight layer of complexity to it, but it has a benefit. So this is not really a type of cache entry. This is like a asynchronous process that can run periodically, which will invalidate stale cache entries based on recent writes to the store. So the idea is that if you use this, it can allow for using much longer TTLs for cache entries in order to increase the hit rate while getting to keep a reasonable amount of like window for staleness by letting the cache controller run periodically. So let me get into a bit more about how it works. Again, it periodically checks for recent writes to the store, and it will invalidate cache entries that were set before the recent writes. Since if a write came in, then some old cache entries can't be trusted anymore. So all the check query cache entries set before the latest write are invalidated, while only the relevant check iterator cache entries, or I guess it should be any iterator cache entries, are invalidated based on what tuples those writes affected. And invalidation is triggered asynchronously by check and list objects requests. And oh, I forgot to include some of the configurations, but basically there's two configurations. One is just enabling or disabling it, and the other is setting a TTL for the cache controller. And the TTL is just how often the cache controller can run. So basically, when you use the cache controller, its TTL is now your staleness TTL. So you could set like a 10-minute TTL for your check query or check iterator cache entries, and then just set like a 10-second TTL for your cache controller. And every 10 seconds, it will invalidate old entries. So you should get stale results only up to 10 seconds. So it's a nifty way of kind of increasing your cache hit rate. So yeah, just going to quickly mention some best practices around production deployments. You know, pretty typical stuff. Just you know, when you're enabling it, enable it incrementally. Start with the query cache since that probably uses like less memory compared to the iterator caches. Um, and while you're enabling, you'll just the main thing to monitor is the memory consumption, since these are all cached in memory. And you'd want to set up alerts for low cache hit rates or high eviction rates, also for high memory usage, those kinds of things. And you'd want to basically periodically review it and adjust accordingly. There are a few different configurations for, the TTLs or how many tuples iterator cache entries can hold. Um, the TTLs, that's kind of a business decision about how much staleness you can tolerate. The maximum number of items, that's, kind of depending on your uh, memory limits. So something to monitor and kind of adjust accordingly. Um, yeah, and just the last thing to mention is that all this came about from working on some uh, documentation for caching. So that's still in progress, but hopefully should be up soon. And yeah, we'll share it with everyone then. So that is it for me. I will pass it to Justin. Do you want to share, Justin?
Yeah, sure, I can share.
There's a question there from Jeremy about invalidation.
Oh, yes, let me open my chat. Okay. Is it possible in the future to optimize the cache controller so that it doesn't invalidate all check query caches? Example of check for relationship was the issue, such that A to B to C is traversed, but a new tuple was written deleted for type D to E. There's no reason for the ABC check to be invalidated. Yeah, we could definitely explore that. I feel like I remember there was some reason why we couldn't do that. Um, I would have to double check, but yeah, we could think about that.
Like in general, yes, definitely this is an optimization we can consider, but of course it's much trickier to do at scale. So yeah, we more time and like things we're gonna keep optimizing what we have.
Yeah, no worries. So we just turned on the cache controller this past month, and it definitely improved a lot of our results because we were able to set the iterator cache to a much longer duration. But when I was looking at the percentages for like cache hit, it was interesting that I observed that the query cache hit rate dropped a lot. But the overall performance of the system got better. So I guess this presentation explained to me why that is the case, because it gets invalidated every right now. So it's still good for us. But I do see that there is an opportunity there.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, it's not that it gets invalidated every write, right? So the cache controller has a TTL too. Okay. So if you have, if you will check every 10 seconds, for example, right? So in those 10 seconds, if there's a write, it won't be invalidated. Right?
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's like every write after the cache controller TTL has passed.
Yeah. So you have at least the cache control DTL as the time values will be cached, right? But of course, yeah, if you enlarge the iterator control, the iterator cache very large, and you're having writes, yeah, those will be expired when the cache controller expires, right? Every 10 seconds if there are writes. I think there's certain logic to say that we might need to include in the documentation about. It's not that each write we expire everything, right? We evict everything. There are certain writes, I think, that evict part of the cache.
Right.
Like in the cache, yeah. So there's some logic there. It's not super dumb that any write invalidates everything, right?
Yeah, definitely for the iterator cache, it only
Yeah.
invalidates part of it.
Okay.
Currently, the check query cache, if I remember correctly, I believe it does invalidate
Okay.
all of them.
Okay. So let's make sure we also mention that in the document. So we are working on it in a document right now that explain all of this in more detail. I think we should explain that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, no,
Awesome.
that's a good suggestion, Jeremy. That's right now we don't quite have enough information to do that we're storing, if you know what I mean. Like we could store, does Justin have access to draft PRs? We might have the top level result cached, and then we don't know that we changed one of the underlying subqueries, and that's why we can't do it right now. That doesn't mean that we can't do it in the future.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Here, cool. Let's put this in here. Okay, so I am here to talk about Datastore throttling. So if you have had to manage multiple stores, which you may have, you'll know that some stores they'll ask you for a check. It'll be very simple to resolve. It doesn't take a whole lot of work from your DB or your computers. Sorry, I'm just rearranging everybody's faces to make this make sense on my screen. But there are always noisy neighbors or unlucky requests that just happen to hit a path in your graph, your authorization graph, where all of a sudden you're running hundreds or even we've seen thousands of queries to answer a single check or a single list objects request, which is not ideal. So what we want is a way to protect ourselves and to protect any other stores from a noisy neighbor. So what we have done, we had a method in place prior. I'll talk about that a little bit toward the end of this. That method for throttling wasn't as effective. We recently rolled out Datastore Throttling, which I will describe here. So it is available as of early December, I think. There's a couple of flags to enable. It is off by default. And these threshold values are set to 0. So even if you enable it, it still will not work because it'll see these zeros and it won't do anything. So you need to turn it on, also set a threshold, set a duration. It is configurable separately for check and also for list objects and also for list users. I want to stress that it is not a concurrency limiter. It is strictly a count of the DV reads that were performed during a request. So I'll get a little bit more into that right now. So how it really works is you'll set a threshold. So like here in this example, we say that check Datastore throttle threshold equals 100. That means that an individual check request can run 100 database reads, no problem. They will just be allowed through. We won't do anything. They will just run like a normal request. If that request ends up needing more, so let's say it needs 120 reads, the remaining 20 will each be delayed by the duration that you have set in the environment. So in this case, all 20 of them will be delayed by 5 milliseconds. That doesn't mean that there will be a 100 millisecond delay on this request. It'll probably be somewhere between like 5 and 6 milliseconds because they will all hit the delay at the same time. So it's not total protection, but this also the exact behavior depends on what you have configured for your max concurrent reads for check. Because how the bounded data store, which is a newer thing, but everybody is currently using the bounded data store, but there is no throttling in it. But there is a concurrency limit in it. By default, the concurrency limit is unlimited. So if you haven't set it yourself, then it's unlimited. So if you have a check request and it comes in and it fires off a thundering herd of 1,000 database queries, 900 of those in this example will all be delayed by 5 milliseconds, and then you will get hit with a 900 query thundering herd 5 milliseconds later. We would recommend, if you have a lot of volume, to set a maximum concurrent reads, because then you'll hit your maximum concurrency, and then there will be an additional wait. And this delay that is enforced by Datastore Throttling will be staggered by your concurrency limit, so you won't end up blasting your database with 900 queries all at once. I can go into more detail about that if anybody has questions about it. For the complete full details, you can see this bounded data store file. It's actually pretty small and very easy to read. It'll be pretty clear. There is a method in there called bound, which is what is doing everything. It's tracking how many reads have been performed, it's tracking how many concurrent reads are active, and it's managing the throttles. I mentioned we have dispatch throttling, which was an earlier attempt to implement some throttling for resource protection. And we found through working with it that it was not super effective, and it also was difficult to know exactly when it was going to hit, because the concept of a dispatch in OpenFGA is sort of just how many, you can think of it as recursive calls. So check may fire off another 4 checks. And we were trying to throttle based on the depth of the recursive tree, which is very difficult to predict. Whereas with data store throttling, it's really easy. It's really predictable. You can gather the metrics on your query counts from your own services and try and determine what a good value might be for you. But you know, when somebody hits 100 queries, then they will be slowed down, and it's easily configurable. So I think that is about all I had to say. Is that all I had to say? It is all I had to say. If anybody has questions, go for it. If not, I will pass it back to Andres. And why am I? Sorry, my off is acting crazy.
Okay. I have a comment about, so you might ask yourself, why would you want to use something like Datastore Throttling, right? And in general, the use case for an OpenFGA customer could be, you might have your own customers, right? So Headspace has many companies using their product, and the performance of the queries that the checks that those companies need to do will depend on the shape of the data that that company has. So for example, if a specific company has a lot of users, a lot of groups and nested groups, and another company has a fewer amount of users, the resources that the checks for company A will take will be higher than the resources that it takes for company B, right? So you might have your own noisy neighbors in the context of your own deployment. So if you see that is happening, you have 2 options. So you end up increasing the capacity of the database so you can handle everything, or you slow down your more noisy neighbors, right? So this option of Datastore Throttling gives you a way to do that, right? So without increasing your database capacity, you can, and memory and other things that will be impacted by these expensive queries, you can slow them down a little, right? And without impacting the rest of your customers. I have 2 things. First, something just we've been talking in the last few meetings about some important improvements we are doing in the ListObjects algorithm. We are pretty close to kind of release this officially on OpenFGA. These numbers here are kind of, we took one of the customers that have heavier uses of ListObjects in our cloud product, and this is the before and after latency that we found. So today you can enable that there's a pipeline ListObjects experimental flag that enables this behavior. This is a completely rewrite of ListObject that takes a different path approach to implement it, which is much faster and consumes less resources. So stay tuned. So hopefully in our next meeting, we can get deeper on how this works. And there are some trade-offs. This consumes a little more memory. So it might happen that you need to bump your memory if you're opting to use this new option. But it's getting much faster. Some scenarios are also faster than this one. Some customers, this was kind of the most representative one that we had. Okay, so now I'm gonna do a demo. This is a demo that basically shows. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to use OpenFGA to protect to add authorization to an MCP server. There's two parts of this feature. One that is based on, it's built to demo some features from Auth0, which is the authentication to the MCP. It's not very relevant for the use case. You could use any identity provider that implements the proper flow for authentication MCPs. I'm using Auth0 for obvious reasons. So let me show you how this will do. So if you're familiar with MCPs, and if not, I will kind of explain you pretty quickly. You have, when you authenticate to an MCP, you can now call certain tools in an MCP, right? What we're doing here is we are adding an OpenFGA model that will let you decide first which users can use each tool based on this relationship that can be assigned. So for example, we can say certain tools can be used by everyone, by a specific user, by the members of a specific role, or with temporal access. Okay, so hopefully you all know these constructs from in OpenFGA. We can use them to decide who can use specific role, and you can define then user groups and user roles. And then you can have specific permissions for specific tools. In this case, I have a tool that returns a list of documents, and we're going to have a relation that lets me query if I can view private documents or not, right? So I can add logic that is specific to specific tools in this model to then filter or decide what actions can you take in the tools that you're invoking, right? In this case, it will be filtering the private documents, but it could be which repositories you can write to or things like that, right? So whatever you want to add as depending on the domain that your application is about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start OpenFGA here. I'm going to start OpenFGA locally. And we have a model here, and this is store file that points to a model and some tuples. The tuples, what they do is they say that everyone can use a tool called getDateTime. Then there's a tool that is, and there's a role that is admins that can access all the tools, and they can access private documents. There's a team called the content team, that they can use all the tools, but cannot view private documents. And then the marketing role can, the members of the marketing group have the content editor role, okay? And then the members of the managers group have the admin role. There's no users here. There's only the relationship between tools, groups, and roles, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna import this. Let's find the README. I'm gonna import this. So this README has instructions how to run this with OpenFGA and with Auth0FGA. And then I'm gonna first import the model and data in OpenFGA. I get the store ID, so I'm gonna create a environment variable with that, so I can use from the CLI. And I also take this store ID and put it in my configuration. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start the, let me start the MCP server. And then I'm gonna start this tool called MCP Inspector, which is a way to interact with an MCP server. So what you do is you do connect. This will take me to Auth0. So this is kind of the authentication piece of MCP. I authorize, and then it shows me, I can tell me the tools that I can use. I list the tools. I can use a tool that everyone can use, right? So we had this getDateTime tool, and we had a tuple that says everyone can use it. Okay, So I can use it, I can call the tool, and it tells me what is the datetime. Now what I can do is I can add the user that is logged in to a specific group. So I can say something like, let me think here, 22. I will add a user to the managers group. This is a script that basically what it does, it goes to Auth0 and finds the user ID for specific email. This is my email. And gmail.com. It will find the user ID and it will add it to this managers group in OpenFGA. So if I now clear this and list the tools, I now get all the tools, right? Because I'm part of the manager role. If I go and call get documents, so I can call read, now I can use all the tools. And the who am I shows here my user ID, get datetime, get documents. If I use get documents, you see I have 6 documents, and I can see public and private documents here. Okay, public false. Now what I can do is I can remove the group from, just put it here. Sorry. Let me remove the user from managers. So now if I do that and then go back to the inspector, this is interesting because if I try to run a tool now, I don't have permission to do it. It will tell me the tool doesn't exist, right? It just filters the tool I can access, so I don't get access to that one. It doesn't exist anymore for me. If I do list tools, I only have get datetime. And if I now add the user to the marketing group, now I can clear list of tools, get all of them, get documents. I get only 3 documents. I can only see the view, the public documents, right? And the last thing you can do is just let me now at least remove the user from manager, from marketing. And now I can add the user, the permissions to use the read tool for 20 seconds. Okay, so this will create a tuple with a temporal access. And now I clear these tools, I can use grids. And then if I do this for 20 seconds, eventually it will fail. These 20 seconds take a lot of time to pass. Okay, now it failed, right? So that's because the tuple expired and the permission, and sorry, the condition is not longer true. Okay, so that is the idea. Of course, this is just an example of OpenFGA. There's nothing specific in the OpenFGA model that you already don't know, but I think it's a good way to find another use case and for how you can use OpenFGA. In general, something we are seeing is, so why would you want to have authorization at the MCP layer, right? And there are different reasons. One is because you want agents to have less permissions than what the application user has in the underlying app, right? So you want to restrict what you can do with an agent. And the other one is sometimes it might be too hard for you to add proper permissions in your API layer, right? So if you want to expose your API to an agent, you want the authorization to be better implemented well, right? If you expose an API without proper authorization, it's a recipe for disaster exposing that API to an agent. So you can add the logic that you would have added in the API at the MCP layer, right? So as wrapping your API with an MCP layer, that is more the way the agent will talk to it, and you add the logic there. So that's what you use, some use cases why this could be valuable. And we are seeing a few companies in the space that are exploring or taking this approach, right? So these are 3 API or AI gateway products that are announcing they're starting to use OpenFGA in their product. This is a demo from Solo.io, which are they built, and Envoy and some tools for this product agent gateway to do gateways for AI scenarios, and they are explaining how you can use FGA for that. And Zuplo, which is a company that's using OpenFGA for a while, they just shipped an AI gateway that uses this OpenFGA for the same reasons. Any questions, comments about the whole MCP thing? Not a lot of community news, but we will be in Amsterdam next March. We'll be presenting with Tetrate, another of the companies that work with Envoy, on how you can use OpenFGA with Envoy, and for different scenarios, AI will be one of them. And then nothing else. So the roadmap, you can see it online. We'll be adding some AI-powered tooling for docs in the documentation side that we might find interesting. This is something new, and we're wrapping up most of the work with the ListObjects, and hopefully before our next community. And as usual, if you haven't started a project or shared it with your friends, please do that. And if you are using OpenFGA in production, please add yourself to our adopters page. It's super important for us to have that, because of the way the community has more confidence on companies, that companies are using the product in production. So I ask you and encourage you to do that if you can. And yes, right, sorry.
One more I'll add is exactly what Jeremy did today. So if you're using any of our experimental features or any of the flags, and you're seeing results, whether good or bad, do let us know. Like this helps us to get them to production or to fix any issues before we get them to become the default. So thank you for using them, and just please share your feedback with us.
Great.
Saad,
okay.
Stephen has a question around caching. Are there metrics that are available they can look at?
Yes, there are metrics. I did see a comment on the PR for someone was asking if we could mention those. So maybe we'll try to mention those in the document as well.
This is awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone, then, and see you again next month. We're going to have some company presenting their OpenFGA story, and during the holiday break didn't help us to get someone ready for this month, but we already have a couple that are interested in presenting next month. So it's going to be fun, and hopefully we can all learn a lot from them. Okay.
Thank you.
See you, everyone. Bye-bye.